Good morning. Nice to see you all today. All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining our Sunday service here on Zoom or YouTube, wherever you're checking in from. It's happy to see your virtual faces. This morning, we're going to start by reciting the three refuges, which you can find in the booklet. I believe the link to that is provided in the chat or in the description of the YouTube video. I go for refuge to Buddha, my deeply awakened mind, the living source of understanding and compassion, which must be cultivated to be known fully. I go for refuge to Dharma, the path of mindful living, leading to healing, joy, and enlightenment, the way of peace, which must be cultivated to be known fully. I go for refuge to the Sangha, the loving and supportive community of practice, realizing harmony, awareness, and liberation, which must be cultivated to be known fully. I am aware that the three jewels are within my heart. I vow to realize them. I vow to understand living beings and their suffering. I vow to cultivate loving kindness and compassion and to practice joy and equanimity. I vow to live simply and sanely, content with few possessions, and to keep my body healthy. I vow to let go of all worry and anxiety in order to be light and free. I am aware that I owe so much to my parents, teachers, friends, and all beings. I vow to be worthy of their trust, to practice wholeheartedly so that understanding and compassion will flower, and I can help living beings be free from their suffering. May the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha support my efforts. May the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha support my efforts. May the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha support my efforts. All right, if you turn in your pages in your booklet, we will next recite the Heart Sutra, which is found on page 8 of the booklet. And we chant the name of the sutra at the beginning and the end. The Maha Prajna Paramita Hridaya Sutra. The Bodhisattva of great compassion, from the deep practice of prajna, paramita, perceived the emptiness of all five skandhas and delivered all beings from their suffering. O Shariputra, form is no other than emptiness, emptiness no other than form. Form is emptiness, emptiness form. The same is true of feeling, thought, impulse, and consciousness. O Shariputra, all dharmas are empty. They are not born nor annihilated. They are not defiled nor immaculate. They do not increase nor decrease. So in emptiness, no form, no feeling, no thought, no impulse, no consciousness, no eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind, no form, sound, smell, taste, touch, nor objects of mind, no realm of sight, no realm of consciousness, no ignorance, nor extinction of ignorance, no old age and death, nor extinction of them, no suffering, no cause of suffering, no cease from suffering, no path to lead out of suffering, no knowledge, no attainment, no realization, for there is nothing to attain. The Bodhisattva holds on to nothing but prajna paramita. Therefore, the mind is clear of any delusive hindrance. Without hindrance, there is no fear. Away from all perverted views, one reaches final nirvana. All Buddhas of past, present, and future, through faith in prajna paramita, attain to the highest perfect enlightenment. Know then the prajna paramita is the great Dharani, the radiant peerless mantram, the utmost supreme mantram, which is capable of allaying all pain. This is true beyond all doubt. Proclaim now the highest wisdom, the prajna paramita. Gate, gate, para gate, parasamgate, bodhisvaha. Gate, gate, para gate, parasamgate, bodhisvaha. Gate, gate, para gate, parasamgate, bodhisvaha. The Maha Prajna Paramita Hridaya Sutra. And together we bow. Before I get started this morning, I want to thank Kent and Bethany, our tech people for the day, for their help in making all this happen and enabling us to do virtual services while we are still living through the midst of a pandemic. All right. Well, it's nice to see everyone this morning. Like I said, for those who don't know, my name is Caleb, or my Dharma name is Tongjin Su. Yesterday, I went up north with a friend. We went hiking in Ludington. It's one of my favorite places to go. And of course, this time of year during autumn, it was gorgeous, right? The trees were changing to gold and orange and red. And while we were there, I went with this sort of thought in the back of my mind. Recently, in a Facebook group I'm part of, I saw an article someone shared. It wasn't a particularly new article, but I read it and I learned that there are teams of Buddhist ecology monks in Thailand and Cambodia, and they have been ordaining trees as Buddhists since the 1980s. they do this, they go out to the forest, and they do it in order to dissuade loggers from cutting down the forests. Deforestation is a really big problem in those countries. So monks will go out, they'll usually choose the oldest trees in the forest. They will wrap the tree in traditional saffron monk robes. They'll recite scriptures about faith and ecology and alleviating suffering. And in those countries, it's considered a grave taboo to harm a monk in any way. Therefore, for a logger to go out, cut down one of these trees who they see is an ordained Buddhist monk, that would be to commit a very serious offense, both spiritually and legally. So Sanghas in Thailand and Cambodia have been doing this for 30 to 40 years as a way to combat deforestation in a way, right? So what gets me is, in a very literal way, those trees are members of a Sangha. And that's a thought that I haven't really been able to get out of my head because I found it so interesting. There are trees out there who are members of our global spiritual community of Buddhists. So while I walked around in the woods yesterday, I was looking at these trees and then entertaining this thought, thinking about what it would mean for these trees that I was encountering to also be members of a Sangha, maybe members of our Sangha. We live in an era today, a time period that scientists have dubbed the Anthropocene. Kind of a big word, but it basically means that we've reached a point as humans where we are affecting life on Earth on a geological scale. In the past, extinction events have occurred due to big shifts, either atmospherically or geologically. A comet hits and kicks up a bunch of dust. But now the largest extinction event in history is happening, and it's on our hands. We, as humanity, are the culprits. Just 2 weeks ago, 22 different species of birds, fish, and shellfish were declared extinct by the US government. So what does this mean as Dharma practitioners? What does this mean as Buddhists? What are our ethical obligations to other species, and what can they teach us? So the title of today's Dharma talk is Great Earth Sangha. The inspiration for it came from Dogen, who's the 13th century founder of Soto Zen. Dogen spent most of his life living at a temple called Eiheiji in Japan. It was nestled deep in the mountains. It's still there today, 700 years later. You can go and visit. And there's trees, mountains, rivers, and Dogen found the area around him itself very inspiring to his Dharma practice. In his book called the Shobo Genzo, it's a collection of his essays and sermons. There's a particular sutra called the Mountains and Rivers Sutra, and that will serve as our reading for our Dharma talk today. The first thing really that Dogen makes note of in the Mountains and Rivers Sutra is that there's a long history of Buddhist practice occurring in the wilderness, in the wild, outside of cities. Past Dharma practitioners practice while outdoors in the woods, alongside rivers or high in mountains, and the original bhikkhus in India would retreat deep into the woods to meditate, and many Theravada schools still do this today. There's a whole Thai tradition just called forest monks. And Dogen hit upon this in his first two verses of the Mountains and Rivers Sutra. He says, "Mountains and waters right now are the actualization of the ancient Buddha way. Because mountains are high and broad, the way of riding the clouds is always reached in the mountains. The inconceivable power of soaring in the wind comes freely from the mountains." When Dogen talks about riding the clouds or his power of soaring in the wind, he's talking about meditation and the quality of mind cultivated in meditation. He's noting that it's no coincidence that Dharma practitioners have retreated throughout time to the wild and found solitude in mountains and in caves and in forest groves to practice and meditate. Remember, the founder of our entire tradition, Shakyamuni Buddha, spent 12 years in forests and mountains, eventually realizing enlightenment while sitting underneath a tree, the Bodhi tree. And during that fateful night, when Mara challenged Shakyamuni Buddha, demanding to know who would serve as his witness to affirm that Shakyamuni was truly worthy of attaining enlightenment. At that moment, Shakyamuni touched the earth, and the earth herself was his witness. Clearly, contact with nature is a core element of our practice throughout its history. So in this Dharma talk today, I want to call for the importance of relating to mountains, trees, waters, and animals as an indispensable element of our practice, especially in the context of climate catastrophe. Dogen's term for the greater community of life is the Great Earth. And I want to use this term, Great Earth or Great Earth Sangha, rather than the word environment, because the word environment implies something dualistic, that there is a me, a solitary me here, and around me is my environment, which I'm separate from and cut off from. It centers me, it centers the self, to use the word environment, and affirms a story of separateness from it. Even saying nature is dualistic, because nature sets up a tension between wild nature and human culture. But in reality, our being and our surroundings are not distinct, not separate. Neither is nature nor culture. We are all mutually interdependent. We interbe. So today I will use the phrases either more than human world or Great Earth Sangha when referring to things we typically call the environment. So let's read a little bit more about what Dogen has to say about mountains. Dogen says, mountains do not lack the qualities of mountains. Therefore, they always abide in ease and they always walk. Mountains walking is just like human walking. Therefore, do not doubt mountains walking, even though it does not look the same as human walking. Do not doubt mountain walking, even though it does not look the same as human walking. Have you ever walked on a mountain? Have you ever had the chance to climb up high on a mountain and look out, seeing things from that 10,000 foot view? Did anything look different? Surely it was a very different way to look at the world, right? Dogen is inviting us to consider other perspectives beyond our own. Many animals talk, even though it does not sound like human talking, it's still communication, right? Cats meow, dogs bark, birds chirp. They all have forms of communicating, even though it does not look like our form of communication. Trees breathe in carbon dioxide and exhale oxygen, the reverse of what we do. And they breathe even though it does not look the same as our human breathing. And as Dogen says, mountains walk, or you could think move, right? Mountains still move, but it's completely imperceptible to us because it takes place due to the long shifting of tectonic plates, right? So mountains walk even though it doesn't look like human walking. Dogen goes on to say, if you doubt mountains walking, you do not know your own walking. It's not that you do not walk, but that you do not know or understand your own walking. So often we do things without even being aware that we're doing them. But in our practice, we bring more awareness to what it is we do. So he says, since you do not know your own walking, you should fully know mountains walking. Mountains are neither sentient nor insentient. You are neither sentient nor insentient. So Dogen's a little bit of a difficult writer. He uses a lot of poetry and paradox and strange metaphors. But I think ultimately Dogen is playing with our perspective. He's inviting us into an expansion of our awareness. There's a dialogue he's initiating between, for instance, our bodies as they walk, and with the more than human world, with the mountains and other beings that we typically perceive as insentient. We usually think of trees and rocks and rivers and sometimes even animals as insentient, as dumb or lacking intelligence, as inanimate. But Dogen calls us and mountains both sentient and insentient, having mind and not having mind. So he's extending personhood and perspective to these other beings who we usually see as inanimate or mute. And in the morning bell chant, there's one line that forever sticks out in my mind, that everything is created by mind alone. If everything is created by mind alone, then the quality of what is created or perceived by a mind depends on the quality of the mind doing the creating or perceiving. It's kind of a mouthful, so I'll say that again. If all is created by mind alone, then what is created will change according to the mind that is, and the quality of the mind that is creating it or perceiving it. In contemporary anthropology, this is called perspectivism. Although I and another being may be looking at the same object, our perception of it depends on our perspective. For example, I might view an apple tree as a delicious source of apples or firewood, shade on a very hot sunny day, but a bird may view the apple tree as a place to build a nest, to create a home. A worm may view it as a feast. But Dogen uses an example for water. Kent, would you mind adding the quote to the chat? Kent is adding this excerpt from the chat. It's quite long. I think it would be best if people would be able to read it rather than just listen to me say it. Anyway, Dogen says, all beings do not see mountains and waters in the same way. Some beings see water as a jeweled ornament, but they do not regard jeweled ornaments as water. What in the human realm corresponds to their water? Some beings see water as wondrous blossoms, but they do not use blossoms as water. Hungry ghosts see water as raging fire or pus and blood. Dragons see water as a palace or a pavilion. And some beings see water as the 7 treasures or a wish-granting jewel. Some beings see water as a forest or a wall, but human beings see water as water. Water is seen as dead or alive depending on causes and conditions. Thus, the views of all beings are not the same. You should question this matter now. Are there many ways to see one thing, or is it a mistake to see many forms as one thing? In many ways, the purpose of our practice is to cut through delusion. It is delusion or ignorance that produces our suffering. And there are many levels of delusion to cut through. Dogen is saying that there is not just our own personal delusions, but cultural delusions and even anthropocentric or human delusions, the delusions created by living in a human body with our particular sense organs. When we see something, we often see the associations we have tied to it. So for example, we see water as a liquid that hydrates us. Maybe we see a pool of water and we think of the place where we went swimming as a child, or we think of our fear of swimming, or we have all these associations wrapped up in a thing when we perceive it, memories and ideas. But a fish sees water as a very, very different thing, right? Dogen wants us to see everything in its, quote, own phenomenal expression, meaning to really see it as it is without the layers of artifice and association we attach to it. Dogen says that viewing the world from our usual anthropocentric standpoint is like looking through a bamboo tube at a small corner of the sky. It's just a very small slice of reality, right? For a fuller experience, he recommends entertaining the perspectives of other beings like mountains, hungry ghosts, dragons, and fish. You see, sometimes I fear that my practice, our practice can become overly mentally focused and a little narrow-minded. In meditation, we usually spend time minding our mind, watching thoughts that arise through that field, whether they be anxious or angry, happy, neutral, or otherwise. I usually concern myself with books. I think that's a big entry point for a lot of us for Dharma, is reading books. And they have philosophy and doctrines of our tradition. We learn about lists like the 3 jewels, the 5 precepts, the Noble Eightfold Path, and so on. So we might think that our religion consists solely of texts and books that we consume with our eyes and digest with our minds. But when we take our practice to be merely a collection of lists, we miss out on something essential, and that is the tactile experience of the world, the felt presence of direct experience. Direct experience is all we have, and direct experience of the more than human world, or the great earth, leads to a very different understanding of who is in our community of practice. Hence why I'm calling this talk Great Earth Sangha. Sangha means community. It's the community of beings who are practicing Dharma, right? Usually we think of it as the people who gather in our temple. We could also think of it as the people who gather at all Buddhist temples and engage in Dharma practice. But I think there's room to also see other beings as members of our Sangha too. Communion with these beings we encounter, whose perspectives are very, very different from our own, teaches us spaciousness and how to let things be as they are, just so. Ram Dass once said, when you go out into the woods and you look at trees, you see all these different trees, and some of them are bent, some of them are straight, some of them are evergreens, and some of them are whatever. And you look at the tree and you allow it. You see why it is the way it is. You sort of understand that this one didn't get enough light, so it turned that way. You just allow it. You appreciate the tree as it is. But the minute you get near humans, you lose all of that. You are constantly saying, you're to this, or I'm to that. And so our judgment mind comes in. He says, I practice turning people into trees, which means appreciating them just the way they are. So go figure, lessons from trees, right? So to Dogen, an essential piece of understanding Dharma is Buddha nature. Buddha nature is the idea that within all of us lies the potential to become enlightened. We each hold a Tathagata Garbha, which means a seed of enlightenment, waiting to be cultivated. And for Dogen, it was not humans alone that possess Buddha nature, but all beings possess and express Buddha nature. Everything and everyone is a sleeping Buddha just waiting to wake up. Therefore, the Great Earth Sangha truly is a Sangha, a spiritual community of beings moving toward enlightenment. So I think this provokes a couple questions. We have ethical obligations to other humans, and we have ethical obligations to our other Sangha members. We take the first precept, for instance, saying, I vow to respect and protect life. I vow not to kill. Obviously, we vow not to kill other humans. But what about animals or trees or insects? How does this apply to us on a day-to-day level? Do we eat vegan? Do we go out of our way to avoid stepping on ants? Personally, I try to practice this while walking. I think walking is a practice complementary to sitting. And when walking, I like to breathe and perceive and look at these other beings, right? Try to stay present to different things that arise before my eyes. And I think to wrap up, I don't have anything prescriptive about how we ought to treat other beings, but I think it's a constant moment-to-moment, day-to-day dialogue about how we act towards others, whether they are human or not human, remembering we're acting out of loving kindness. So in conclusion, we see that to live ecologically as Buddhists in the Anthropocene is to tend to other members of our Sangha, and this demands creativity from us, because they have much to teach us if we would only listen to their different perspectives. So next time you are on a walk, I invite you to consider what the trees, mountains, and rivers may have to teach you. To close, I would like to share a poem by Gary Snyder. He was a poet, an ecologist, and a Zen Buddhist who himself found great inspiration in walking in the wilderness. This poem is called O Waters. He says, O waters, wash us, wash me, under the wrinkled granite straight up slab, sitting by camp in the pine shade, someone sleeping, mountains humming and crumbling, snowfields melting, soil building on tiny ledges for wild onions and the flowers like blue polemonium. Great Earth Sangha. Prepare yourselves for meditation. and together we bow. Welcome back. I believe at this time, Kate Ambo wanted to share some announcements.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Kate. My Dharma name is Ambo, and I'm on the fundraising committee. In keeping with our mission, this temple has developed many compassionate services to relieve the suffering in our community throughout the years. One of these services is our recovery program. 3 meetings a week, 52 weeks a year, serving 20 to 40 folks weekly who suffer from varying addictions. This is a valuable service to our community. To keep our recovery program and our other services viable, we need to meet our expenses. Thanks to you, we did do this in September with $1 extra that went to the bank. Thank you. But we're facing heating bills for this winter, so our expenses are going to go up, probably a few $100s a month. Please, if you can, become a donor or increase your donations. To do this, you can look at the bottom of our weekly newsletter. There's information on making donations, or you can go to the temple website, zengr.org, and click the donate button. And if you're shopping on Amazon for over the holidays, remember to join or sign up for Amazon Smile. It won't cost you anything extra, but the temple will receive a small percentage for your purchases. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other announcements at this time? No? All right. So look in the booklets to page 9, where you'll find our closing gathas. We will recite them together to close. For all unskillful action ever committed by me since of old, on account of my beginningless greed, anger, and ignorance, born of my body, mouth, and thoughts, now I atone for them all. Vast is the robe of compassion, a formless field of benefaction. I wear the Buddha's teachings for the benefit of all sentient beings. All beings, one body, I vow to liberate. Endless blind passion, I vow to uproot. Dharma gates beyond number, I vow to penetrate. The great way of Buddha, I vow to attain. Thank you very much. Following our service, feel free to join us on Zoom for our virtual tea session where we can talk, socialize, and chat together. Thank you very much.